This is no normal cruiser. This is the Kawasaki Vulcan 2000, a bike so extreme it would end a war where it would reign unchallenged for years. For 2 decades, one motorcycle stood alone at the top of the displacement throne. Not Harley, not American, but a Japanese cruiser housing the largest production V-twin the world had ever seen. Because in the early 2000s, while everyone else was arguing about chrome and heritage, Kawasaki dropped a 2-liter V-twin into a production cruiser. But here's the part most riders never hear about. This bike wasn't supposed to be polite, it wasn't supposed to be popular, and it definitely wasn't supposed to make sense. There were engineering decisions so extreme that no Japanese manufacturer has attempted them since, and a few details that Kawasaki would probably rather you forget entirely. So today, we're dropping 10 facts that Kawasaki didn't want you to know about the Vulcan 2000. At Kawasaki HQ, Akashi's engineers didn't sketch a cruiser, they drew a war plan. Honda's VTX 1800 had just swaggered onto the scene with 1,795 cubic centimeters of liquid-cooled were bigger than Harley bravado, instantly crowning itself king of the displacement hill. Kawasaki looked at the dyno charts, looked at their own 1,500 cubic centimeter Vulcan Nomad, and did what Kawasaki always does. They reached for a bigger hammer. Design briefs leaked to magazines were almost comic. Must exceed Honda by minimum 250 cubic centimeters, must make 140 pound-feet, must retain shaft drive, must fit existing cruiser frame. Beat the VTX on paper, beat it on the showroom floor, and do it before Honda builds an even bigger VTX. By April 2003, clay models were circulating with a 102mm bore and 126mm stroke. Even the styling cues were weaponized. The Vulcan's faux air-cooled heads mimic Harley to swipe the heritage crowd, while the dual slash-cut pipes exit on the right, same side as the VTX, so parked bikes could dual exhaust diameters like cruiser Pokemon. And it worked, on the spreadsheet, but the only arena that really counted was at dealerships, a lesson Kawasaki would soon learn. The Vulcan 2000 wasn't just a motorcycle, it was the mic drop moment no one saw coming. Roll it out in 2004, and the spec sheet felt like a typo. 2,053 cubic centimeters of fuel-injected V-twin, 141 pound-feet of torque, a 200-section rear tire. Magazines ran headlines screaming, 2-liter cruiser, and riders did the math. That's more cubic inches than a Chevy Vega. But the real shock came 6 years later when Kawasaki wheeled the bike off the stage into retirement, and nobody picked up the baton. Harley's biggest remained the 110 cubic inch. Honda's new darling, the 1,300cc Fury. Yamaha, they had the Raider, but it was still short of the Vulcan. The displacement war was over, and the Vulcan 2000 had fired the final shot. Why? Because Kawasaki proved that bigger stops being better once you can't lift the thing off the side stand without a gym membership. Emissions labs laughed at the smoke, urban riders roasted in the engine's radiant heat, and insurers mailed premium quotes that looked like mortgage statements. The industry blinked, pivoted, and started bragging about ride-by-wire, traction control, and 1,000cc parallel twins that sip fuel while out-accelerating their own older siblings. Today, the Vulcan 2000 leaves on as a cult classic, a 2-wheeled Maginot line that reminds every engineer you can bore it, you can stroke it, but you can't outrun common sense. But what happens when you move units on paper but then bleed cash in the ledger? That was the Vulcan 2000's dirty little secret. Kawasaki shipped a respectable amount of units over the 6 model years, enough to keep showrooms interested, but nowhere near the volume needed to amortize the bespoke crankcases and a special 4,500-ton press dedicated solely to forging the 2,053 cubic centimeter jugs. Every frame weld required thicker wall steel to handle 141 pound-feet pulses. Every final drive shaft was nitrided to survive torque that could twist a small truck axle. Those processes don't scale like plastics on a Ninja 400. They stay expensive whether you build 50 or 1,000. Add homologation costs, different injectors for California, separate ECU maps for Europe, and the margin per unit evaporated faster than gas cap vent lines. Dealers remember Kawasaki reps quietly admitting the project was a halo expense. bankrolled to keep the brand in the horsepower headlines, while the real money came from suburban commuters on 650cc twins. Then, with accelerant added during the 2008 recession to tighten R&D budgets, the board had to reevaluate its standing on the prestige proof of concept that never figured out how to pay its own rent. Sales charts said steady, spreadsheets screamed loss. And then there's the spec sheet, 820 pounds wet. That's a behemoth, 372 kilograms, 141 pound-feet of torque, zero ABS. Kawasaki launched the Vulcan 2000 in that razor-thin moment when big power was sexy and anti-lock brakes were still a nice-to-have option. The bean counters argued a Bosch ABS unit would add another grand to the sticker and 10 pounds to the scale, so the bike rolled out with old-school dual-piston calipers squeezing 300mm rotors. Plenty of feel, zero forgiveness. On a perfect day, the setup was fine. Progressive lever, decent bite, enough feedback to threshold brake like a hero. But add a sprinkle of rain, a patch of diesel, or a panic grab from a re-entry commuter, and 820 pounds of kinetic energy turned into a sliding steel sled faster than you could say insurance deductible. Owners swapped stories of rear-wheel lockups, leaving 30-foot Michelin signatures when the light turned yellow. By 2008, the market flipped. Suddenly, ABS wasn't luxury, it was liability insurance. Euro regulators started sharpening pens, Harley bolted reflex ABS to every CVO, and the Vulcan 2000 sat on showroom floors looking like a dinosaur. Today, collectors call it the last of the wild ones. A monument to the days when stopping was 100% organic and traction control was the soul between your boot and the asphalt. Then twist the grip on a Vulcan 2000 and the bike doesn't lunge, it leans. That moment of polite hesitation isn't lazy coding. It's a calculated bodyguard slipping a velvet rope in front of 141 pound-feet. Inside the ECU, Kawasaki wrote a ramp rate table that limits torque to 80% for the first 15 degrees of throttle, then bleeds in the remaining 20% over the next half second. Early test mules snapped drive shafts when journalists gooned the grip from a standstill, so engineers chose the cheaper fix: code, not chrome moly steel. Owners felt cheated. Where's my big inch hit? But the drivetrain silently thanked them. Shaft joint splines, transmission dogs, and the 1,200-watt starter motor all live longer because the torque arrives like a tide, not a tsunami. Flash a power commander, and you can shave that ramp to near zero. But the bike becomes a warranty grenade. Leave the factory map, and you're riding a 2-decade time capsule that still idles like new. Kawasaki traded instant gratification for long-term survival. Before we get any deeper, if you're still watching right now, you're exactly the kind of rider this channel is for. Because what's coming next is where the Vulcan 2000 stops being big and starts being borderline insane. Facts Kawasaki never advertised. Engineering choices no one else would sign off on. And one reason this bike quietly disappeared that has nothing to do with sales. So if you appreciate motorcycles that shouldn't exist, hit subscribe. And stick around, because by the time we hit number 8, you'll understand why Kawasaki never built anything like this again. Numbers don't always convey scale until you park a 103mm slug next to a 125 cubic centimeter Honda Cub piston and realize it makes everything else look like a dwarf. Each Vulcan 2000 piston displaces roughly 1 full shot glass of mixture per stroke, enough to swallow entire small-bore thumpers whole. Drop one on a bar table and even non-riders whistle. It's a fistful of forged aluminum that looks like it belongs in a diesel tractor, not a street cruiser. That diameter buys torque, hydraulic levels of it, but it also buys problems. A bigger crown means more surface area for combustion heat, more mass hammering the rod bearing, more inertia trying to tear the crankshaft in half at 5,000 RPM. Kawasaki countered with a 24-pound crank, rubber-damped handlebar mounts, and an offset wrist pin that shortens the moment arm just enough to kill the worst vibes. The result isn't silky like a BMW inline 6. It's controlled brutality, a slow-motion sledgehammer that punches you forward without ever breaking a sweat. But it's those pistons that carve the bike's personality in stone. No need to downshift, no need to rev, just roll open the throttle and let the industrial press beneath you squeeze another county into the rearview mirror. Kawasaki's own dyno sheets read like a confession. 2,053 cubic centimeters, 9.5 to 1 compression, and a power curve that crests at a gentlemanly 5,000 RPM. Engineers could have squeezed another 15 to 20 horsepower from the massive 102mm pistons. Raise compression, advance the cams, lean on the ECU, but every extra kilowatt pushed coolant temps past the red hash and piston speeds into treacherous territory. The brief was simple. Make it pull like a freight train, then make it do it forever. So they dialed timing to deliver a flat 100 pound-feet plateau from 1,500 RPM onward, used mild cam profiles that keep valve lift polite, and capped the rev limiter at 5,750 RPM, barely half the crank speed your typical 600 screams to. Inside, forged steel con rods and carburized crank journals are rated for 50% more load than the ECU ever allows. Tuners who fit pipes and PCV units find no hidden timing map waiting to be unlocked, just acres of safety margin. The payoff? Engines with 80,000, 100,000, even 130,000 miles still idling like new. Kawasaki built a monster, then taught it table manners. Proof that the loudest statement a cruiser can make is to never need a rebuild. And then, here's the twist that still stings in Akashi. Kawasaki dropped a 2-liter bombshell, and Milwaukee answered with a new catalog. No bigger engine, no secret skunkworks prototype, not even a cheeky CVO badge. Harley simply let the Vulcan 2000 rev its heart out while it sold Road Kings faster than ever. Why? Because cruiser shoppers weren't cross-shopping spec sheets. They were shopping tattoos, leather vests, and Saturday morning garage dreams. Harley's engineers knew torque is only half the equation. The other half is theater. The potato cadence, the air-cooled fins, the 115-year origin story, those intangibles don't show up on a dyno, but they dominate the dyno of emotion. Kawasaki delivered a physics lesson. Harley sold a membership card. Dealers reported the same script. Customer walks past the Vulcan, pauses at the 2,053 cubic centimeter sticker, then swings a leg over a 96 twin cam because of Boy Club exclusivity. Sales numbers proved the point, although there were respectable numbers produced across 6 model years. The displacement war was over before it began. Regardless of its engineering prowess, Harley won by retreating to the barracks and refused to fight, but instead defend the fort, proving that in cruiserland, heritage beats horsepower every single time. The Vulcan 2000 didn't get a farewell tour. It got a pink slip from a bureaucrat with a gas analyzer. By 2009, Euro 3 and the coming Euro 4 demanded sub 0.15 grams per kilometer, hydrocarbons, and cold start catalyst light-off within seconds. Try that with a 102mm piston the size of a coffee can barely compression squeezing at 1,200 revolutions per minute. The big V-twin was born in an era when air-cooled sounded romantic, not retrograde. Its twin catalysts were already stuffed like shop rags in a sewer pipe, and the ECU was still running narrow-band O2 sensors that couldn't sniff their own tailpipe. Kawasaki's bean counters ran the spreadsheet. Bore the block for 4 valve heads, add dual spark mapping, liquid cool the jugs, shoehorn a 5-liter charcoal canister under the faux tank, then rehomologate on 3 continents. Cost per bike? Sales volume? The file closed with a single red stamp. Not justified. Production ended in 2010 without a successor press release, just a quiet notice to dealers that the king was abdicating before the emissions court arrived. Riders woke up 1 model year later, and the biggest V-twin on Earth had simply vanished. Strangled not by lack of demand, but by parts per million, it could no longer breathe. For 20 straight years, the line never moved. 2,053 cubic centimeters. Kawasaki Vulcan 2000, undisputed V-twin king of displacement. Indian, Honda, even Harley's own cruiser fleet all waved the white flag well short of the 2-liter wall, and the industry decided Kawasaki had shown everyone exactly how far was too far. Then came the asterisks. In 2025, Harley-Davidson unleashed the CVO Road Glide RR, a 131 cubic inch, which is an equivalent 2,151 cubic centimeters Screamin' Eagle monster that finally cracks the barrier. But with caveats big enough to swallow a bike show. Only 131 examples were built, each carrying a $110,000 MSRP. It may be a production model, but it's more a hand-assembled collector's piece. So technically, Harley claims the crown, yet the Vulcan 2000 remains the largest V-twin any normal human could walk into a dealer and buy. Kawasaki built a king for the masses. Harley built a museum piece for the 1%. History books will note the number, but the lesson stays the same. The Vulcan 2000 still marks the spot where big enough met too big, and the rest of the market decided to stay home. The Kawasaki Vulcan 2000 wasn't a mistake. It was a statement, a moment in time when a Japanese manufacturer decided to stop playing by cruiser rules and instead asked a dangerous question: how far is too far? The answer was 2,053 cubic centimeters, a torque curve like industrial machinery, and a motorcycle so extreme the industry quietly agreed never to do it again. And that's why bikes like this matter, because they prove what's possible when engineers are allowed to build without fear. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit subscribe. This channel is dedicated to the motorcycle's history forgot. And drop a comment if you've ever ridden a Vulcan 2000, or if you think nothing today has the nerve to replace it. Ride safe, ride smart, and we'll see you in the next one.